We're back and moving fast. Now we're starting on to the framing of the Vera Cruz job here in Chester, Virginia. And I am excited now that our delivery from BFS has finally arrived. So let's get in there and make it happen, Captain. We were able to get our 2x12s installed from end to end. These are called our joists, which you guys probably already know that, but if you did not, these are our floor joists. And these are laid out similarly to how everything else is laid out in the house, including walls, roofs, rafters, ceiling joists. We all tried to either use a 16-inch on center layout, a diamond layout, which is 19 1/4 approximately, or a 2-foot layout, which you'll see on these trusses here in a couple days. But for these floor joists, we grabbed one side of the house and we set our first joist back 3/4 of an inch from 16 inches. That is because if you get a whole sheet of plywood, most lumber comes in 2-foot nominal lengths, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and so on and so forth. Well, plywood typically comes 4 feet by 8 feet. We do that so we can order things properly, design buildings efficiently without wasting money with a lot of waste. So that being said, with our floor joist, you bring your layout across and you mark the first joist from the very end, 3/4 of an inch back from the 16-inch mark, which would be 15 inches and a quarter. You put a mark and an X in front of that, letting you know that from the mark forward goes the joist. This will help you control where your lumber is located and know that your plywood is going to break exactly in the center of the joist or stud. Now you may or may not be able to tell, but the band board in front of this area is also made of pressure treated material. The reason that is, anywhere you attach to a concrete patio, porch, or a deck, you need to have a pressure treated band behind that area. This is to help you because that area is going to be exposed to moisture and the exterior elements. Directly behind where the front porch will be built, we have a pressure treated band with galvanized nails. We will extend the pressure treated band to make sure that it comes all the way past where we know the deck is going to stop, and we will break this band directly in the center of this next joist that is directly after where our porch stops. This will ensure that where our deck is located is properly built and is going to withstand against the elements. One thing you need to make sure of when you build your walls is that you crown all of the studs. Equally to the joist in the floor, you want all of the arcs of the wood going in the same direction. You don't want one crown going this way and the next crown going underneath. So to create some conformity, we put all of the crowns up. We don't want that exterior plywood nor the sheetrock being all wavy. You will really start to tell when it comes time to do your interior trim or your exterior siding. If you have a stud that is over 1/4 of an inch of crown, probably even if it's 1/4, I probably wouldn't use it. Stack it up neatly, return it back to your supplier because they will take it back and give you full credit. You cannot build a good quality product with lumber that is not in that same facet. Just like the floor joist that we talked about earlier, we have these studs set on a 16-inch on center layout. So we always have to make sure that we move the first stud back 3/4 of an inch. And if you're going to hook your tape all the way at the end of the wall and not move it and just continue to pull out that away, well then you need to mark every stud 3/4 of an inch back from the red mark. These tape measures are really, really innovative and have a red mark on every 16 inches throughout the length of the tape. They also have a diamond mark that is consistent with the 19 1/4 inch layout that also breaks perfectly on 8 foot, as well as the 2-foot layout that is marked on here as well in black numbers. So that gives you 3 options for layouts that work consistently with all building materials that we have here inside the United States. So if you can use one of those 3 layouts, you're gonna save money by not having a lot of cutoff and waste going into your dumpster. So we've set here with our tape measure hooked on the very end of the stud, or of the bottom plate, if you will. And we mark the first mark right on 15¼ inches, set the X ahead so we know exactly where to place the 2x4 stud, and so on and so forth. The next stud will be exactly on the mark at 31¼ so that the center of the stud is exactly at 32 inches. So that way when we get to 4 feet and we install our first piece of plywood, the plywood will be flush with the end of the wall, as well as breaking in the center of this 2x4 stud, allowing it to grab the maximum amount of support from the stud while allowing the next sheet to do the exact same thing. A really cool thing about starting your layout from the same side of the house, whether it's for your studs or your floor joist, is that if you do start from the same side of the house, your studs will be directly over top of the floor joist, which just adds a level of strength. If your rafters are sitting directly on top of your studs, and your studs are sitting directly on top of your joists, and your joists are on top of your foundation, there is no wiggle room for the walls, floors, or roof to be moving up and down. That is the most efficient and strong way to do rough framing. There are much more elements in a wall that could be possible to mark other than just studs. One of those are intersecting walls. When you do have an intersecting wall, you have it on your blueprints, typically the measurements come from the outside towards the inside. So when we have a measurement for our interior wall that's going to be running perpendicularly, to our exterior wall, we'll pull that measurement, which is 135½, and we'll mark, depending on the size of the wall, which in this case is 2x4, so it's 3½ inches wide. I'll mark my 135.5 inch measurement, which is 11 foot 3½. And immediately I know I can mark the next side, 11 foot 7. This is a distinct mark that will let me know exactly the location of the perpendicular wall that I plan on building in the interior. Now, when we attach our secondary top plate, the purpose of the secondary top plate is to interconnect with opposing walls. They will overlap each other in a system to create strength where one wall will be attached by multiple connecting lumber. But when we install that secondary plate, you do not want it to go really, really tight to your exact mark of your wall, because some wood is a little thicker than others, and you need to allow a little bit of room for leveling in the string lining process. So when you lay out your opposing wall locations on the first top plate, on your secondary top plate, you need to have about an 1/8 inch gap from the line and where the secondary top plate starts. This will ensure that you are able to install your opposing wall without the use of a skill saw or a whole lot of unnecessary trouble. So in this area, we are framing for our exterior door. In this space, we have double French doors that are spacing about 67½ inches in the rough opening, which is the distance that the door will control. So to build this space, we have a few key elements: our jack studs, our king stud, and our headers. The header will help distribute the weight and support the wall throughout the space that is covered by the door and or window that's there. So depending on how big the spacing is what material we use and how many jack studs we use as well. So my typical rule is that if a window spacing is bigger than 4 feet, we really have to upgrade that header to 2x8 or 2x10. However, in the current building code that we are in Chesterfield County, Virginia, all exterior headers have to be 2x10 no matter the size. So we have installed a 2x10 header up to the top portion of the wall with 2 jacks. So our general rule with jacks is, again, under 4 foot, I use 1 single jack. If it's over 4 feet, I like to take my windows to a 2 jack system. And if they get even bigger than 6 feet, I contemplate going to 3 jacks. After 8 foot, I always use at least 3 jacks, or typically is designed by an engineer, and I follow his recommendations. Now in this space, we have a window opening. There's a little bit of difference between how you construct the window framing and how you construct door framing. So we grab the rough opening size, which is the width and the height of the window. You'll get that from your manufacturer or your local building supply. From that point, we know exactly the distance that we need, and this particular window is under 4 foot. So we decided to use a single jack stud underneath the header with the king stud that goes beside the header and attaches to the top plate. Now the parts that you see below the window are called the cripples and the sill plate, like windowsill. You've all heard of windowsill at some point in your life, but this is the piece that we call the windowsill, which is where the window will sit down and the actual sill of the window will be installed. So the 4 parts of the window are the jack stud, the king stud, the cripple, and the sill, to go in combination with the header that goes across all openings. So we'll install these cripples equally on the 16-inch layout as our studs, because the plywood will continue to travel over this entire wall. We want to make sure that our cripples are on the exact same layout that you're using for the common stud, to ensure that your plywood will break properly and be able to be nailed off exactly where it should be. Now you can or cannot install these end cripples. I like to, because it gives me a place to attach my sill directly to the cripple as well as to the jack stud, and just really creating a strong connection point. Now at this location, we have a T mark for our intersecting wall that goes on the interior. Anytime an interior wall connects to an exterior wall, we install these blocks to help us tie in the last stud of the interior wall into the exterior wall. Now, a lot of times guys will just fill these up with multiple common studs, but we have tended to move away from that here in the last 10 years or so to help become more energy efficient and be able to fill this entire space with insulation, just as if it were a common portion of the wall. We were able to go over a lot of things today here on the Vera Cruz job in Chesterfield County, Virginia. We discussed a lot of portions of the exterior walls and how walls are built. Let me know if you have any comments on how we build our walls here in Virginia and what things you do differently in the area where you are. We've been able to complete the last bit of the floor, and they just finished nailing off the band. So we're gonna call it. And until next time, you guys have a great day. Just an end over real quick. So we have some really cool features that they added to the house by So we had a really sweet, dude.